Excellent. So let's actually get started on this one. So welcome everybody. This is the SharePoint Patterns and Practices Meta webcast. This is the community call, bi-weekly community call, and this is the general SharePoint Dev community call. So originally when we started the SharePoint PnP initiative, this call was actually called as a office hours, as we noticed that the monthly community calls were always super busy and there was no time for Q&A. So we established a office hours, which was then meeting bi-weekly, and then whenever the SharePoint framework was actually realized or released, then we started a special interest group call for SharePoint framework people. So this one then was repositioned to be more on the CSOM and REST APIs and general dev, as in general SharePoint development topics and concentration on the solution designs or transformation or PnP core component or PnP PowerShell and so on. And then we have a separate special interest group which is meeting bi-weekly as well at the same time, which is around the SharePoint framework. So on that one we concentrate more on the client-side development topics and other client-side and SharePoint framework and other JavaScript development topics. AKMS SP PnP community, or AKMS SP, well, community is the tech community site where you can actually find more information, or you can ask questions from the people, and that's always highly more beneficial than sending an individual emails to a person. Go to that community site and ask questions from there. AKMS SP Dev Docs, official location for SharePoint documentation. I'm going to mention that one again on the slides. In general, there are multiple different opportunities to participate with the community. So if you're interested on, for example, doing a demo or and showing a solution or a technical pattern in any of these calls, in this one or the other one, at the SharePoint framework call, please let me or Patrick or Bert or whoever to know, and we'll get you queued up and scheduled for the demo. The demos are typically 10 to 15 minutes, and then we talk about what was actually shown and the learnings and all of that about that. Then you can also contribute in GitHub, so you can submit pull requests, you can submit issues and let us know on the things, and obviously that's one way of providing feedback as well. So submitting an issue, letting us know if there's something which we need to fix, or you found potential bug, it's super important that we actually know about those in SharePoint engineering, so we're able to fix them for you. And obviously please provide feedback using other means as well. So concentrating on the discussions and providing feedback also in this in this community calls. Please also do remember to mute yourself until we are in a Q&A section. Potentially you can actually open up yourself or open up the audio for questions. Now, moving on things. So today there's a few slides around the general announcements. Nothing super, let's say, dramatical. There's few things actually there which is interesting. And then we'll concentrate, well, I wouldn't say majority of the time, but quite a lot of time actually on the modernizing your SharePoint site. So Bert is going to lead that discussion, and he's going to announce a great tool which is now available for you to automate your sites to be modernized in certain levels. So Bert is going to talk about what's the limits of that one and how it actually works. And we're going to talk about the modernization in general. And then after Bert, we have Dimcho explaining, well, Dimcho released a add-in to the SharePoint store pretty recently, and actually we haven't really paid attention that much on the SharePoint add-ins in this call, so I think it's a good time to do a refresh on the process and the learnings from Dimcho around that process. So how does it actually work, what was released, and talk about that one. And also at that topic, or after the topic, talk about the potential future direction on the SharePoint framework. So I'll come back on that one after Dimcho's demo. And then we'll hopefully have some time on the Q&A. Now, let's actually move on. A few announcements. So documentation guidance, obviously mentioned already, AKMS SP Dev Docs, and that is our location for official SharePoint documentation. The MSDN will be shut down actually by end of June, if I remember now correctly the timing. So we're moving the CSOM documentation, server-side documentation, all of the documentation to docs.microsoft.com, and that will be then the location where everything will be maintained. Some of this transition is still under work, so we're still working on that one, but the whole objective is to get everything done by end of June. we had 820,000 views on here on April, which is a pretty decent number. I'm hoping to break 1 million by end of by end of June, but who knows? We'll see if we can keep up the interest on our documents. Now, running into an issue, I mentioned this one already around the feedback, but also if you run into an issue in the API, SharePoint framework, whatever you're trying to do from a customization perspective, please let us know. So use the AKMS SPDev issues list, which is the issue list in the SPDev docs. We triage this twice a week. Right now with an engineering, we potentially might be increasing that to be 3 times in a week, and we then prioritize those issues which are coming in. Obviously, if you run into a critical issue like SharePoint Online is down, this is not necessarily the location to report critical issues, critical issues, and then you absolutely need to report them using the other channels as well. But this is really around letting us know that some API has changed, SharePoint framework has changed, there's a behavioral change on somewhere, and then we can figure out, is it a bug on our side in SharePoint engineering side, or is there something, other things to make you successful within your customization. And also all of the comments, if you're adding a comments on the documents, and they are actually visible in this issue list as well for a discussion. So please remember that this issue list are not just one-to-one discussions between you and SharePoint engineering. It's also meant to be a channel for community to discuss between each other. So if you know actually an answer to some of the questions, you can absolutely participate on. New CSOM version for SharePoint Online went live on last Friday. So this is the new NuGet package for SharePoint Online, the client-side object model package. The main changes here are around GPRD, so GDPR, the European legislation changes. So you're able to, for example, delete a user profile with a single command in a PowerShell or using a certain APIs. And that's really the main changes around this release in here. And there is a blog post in the dev.office.com/blogs, which is explicitly explaining what's included within this release. Now, on the kind of new things, this went live actually, I think on Tuesday, Tasha's, well, Monday, Tuesday, depending on which side of the world you're actually living. Tasha's pushed out the blog post in the Microsoft Tech community, so the admin and API support for connecting existing SharePoint team sites to new Office 365 groups is rolling out. So this is now available from a PowerShell side and also from a CSOM side. So you're able to programmatically create a new group for your existing classic SharePoint site. And this is basically the same thing as groupify. Within our official terminology, I don't know who said it, but anyway, we are not supposed to be using the groupify term anymore, which is kind of awkward because we've been using the groupify term within these calls since, when was it, November. I think in November timeframe, November monthly community call, we actually showed first time the groupify preview, which is by Bird. But anyway, so it's not about groupifying, it's about connecting the site to the group. That's really the terminology that should be used. I think the same applies for Hoopify, which I used a few community calls back. I don't think Hoopify is really the right term. On the other hand, it actually explained what happens there. Philip is asking, does this work on the communication sites as well? Bert can actually probably answer that best, but
The answer is yes and no. So
yes, exactly.
You will not see the UI option. So there will be later on a UI option for site owners to self-service group connect. That won't be there for a communication site, but in theory, a communication site is a SharePoint site, so you can connect a group to it. Using APIs.
Yes, indeed. Now, it's not intended.
Whether you want to do it or not, that's the question, because it will give you like a default new homepage, which you can turn off again. So there are different options, but you really have to look at the options and try it out before you start running this en masse on your communication sites.
And maybe one thing to consider is that it is by design that communication sites do not have Office 365 group associated to it. Now, is that decision the right decision from a feature crew who owns the communication sites? obviously that's debatable. There's multiple different opinions on that. So I would rather recommend to open up a discussion in social media or in Microsoft Tech community around the fact that why isn't group created for communication sites, and then making that native as a native behavior as part of the communication site, if that is where we actually want to go. Your feedback as a community member is super important on these things. Personally, probably shouldn't say this out loud, but my personal thing, I'm not in the feature crew owning the communication side, but for me, it would make more sense to have a consistent creation time. For any time you create a SharePoint site collection, you would get a group. Now, it's different people who make those decisions for that particular call. So please give feedback using the different channels on that. Good. Moving on things. So one slide, a few more slides. Some numbers from April 2018. The numbers are obviously more interesting for us in SharePoint community and SharePoint engineering than you as a participant on this call. But this actually shows that there's quite a lot of material, quite a lot of other people than only you interested on the SharePoint development. That's why we actually show these numbers. We had 154,000 minutes YouTube watch time, which is kind of cool. 25,000 views in YouTube. The average, you can easily count how many minutes is the average from that one, the watch time. GitHub usage is growing all the time, which is a good sign because more and more we will be releasing open source stuff and open source initiative in the future as well. So learning to use the GitHub is super important for any SharePoint developer as well. In the docs.microsoft.com, we had 823,000 views. That went actually slightly down, a fraction down from March, but basically April is the spring break month. So that is as expected. We can see that across the multiple other channels as well. On the PnP reusable components, this is PnP PowerShell, PnP CSOM, and PnP JS. We had 11,581 tenants being used using any of those in April, and we hit 9.99 billion HTTP requests, and it was so close to break the 10 billion requests in a single month limit, which the team was slightly disappointed. We'll get there absolutely. Well, looking into growth metrics, will absolutely break the 10 billion within the May. One note in here, because we get that comment quite a lot, people are then asking that, wait, what about SPFX? Right now, we don't have any public numbers which I could actually share around the SharePoint framework usage. In the SPFX bi-weekly community call, we show the growth curves, but we don't actually show numbers. So probably in SharePoint conference, in the keynote, we'll actually talk about the real success of SharePoint framework using actual numbers. So within a few weeks. Now, a quick update on the roadmap. So basically, everything what we promised to deliver in Ignite in this developer roadmap has been pretty much now delivered, at least the preview. So certain capabilities like the Azure AD and the Graph access from SPFX is still in preview, so it hasn't GA'd yet. All of the latest thing going live in the preview, at least, is the Groupify. The next big announcements are queued up for starting from next week. So next week, Tuesday, I think on Monday, we'll probably announce something as a blog post. On Tuesday, there's a SharePoint portal session or SharePoint session, which I'm doing in Build. So if you are in Build, please check that one, where we're actually going to talk about a lot of the new capabilities for SharePoint framework as well. And then SPC is coming within 2 to 3 weeks as well. So a lot of new announcements coming quite soon, but we can't yet talk about them in the community calls. But obviously, next week, Thursday, when we have SharePoint Framework community call, we'll talk about all of the new announcements around the SharePoint Framework, which we mentioned or announced in Build. And then within a week or two, it's going to be SPC, and we're going to talk about more on these things. So please follow up on the social media and on the communications on what is new and what's actually happening. So right now, nothing until Build SPNA. That is correct, Ralph. Now, Build is within 2 business days. So nothing is going to be announced between Friday and today, and build is actually starting on Monday. So we're going to have first announcements going live on Monday. So patience, 1 more day or 2 days, and depending on how do you count this, 2 business days and a few the weekend as well. Good. And then more SharePoint announcements in general into Las Vegas in SBC, which is happening on 21st of May. And now let's actually jump into the modernizing of the SharePoint site. So I'm going to leave the lead for Bert, and Bert is going to go through some slides and then a few live demos and examples on how this actually works. And this is something where we absolutely need to have your feedback. Well, I'll let Bert actually do the intros on this one. Bert, take it away.
We always want feedback from you guys.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But this is like indeed an early preview of the guidance and the tooling that we are creating around modernization. So before actually jumping into the meat of my section, I want to take one step back and just talk about what does modernization mean? What are the big components of modernization? Because we touched upon these already in past community calls, but you can, if I always try to kind of break it down in 3 big steps. One is maximize the use of your modern list and libraries. So modern list and libraries is something that you turn on at tenant level. Sometimes there are certain list and libraries that don't work in modern. We have a scanner that you can run to detect those and to understand why, and then you can remediate and kind of get the most of your list and libraries showing up in a modern UI. So that's step 1. And just to be clear, there is the top link, ak.ms-sp pnp-modernize, will bring you to our guidance on docs.microsoft.com around modernization, which contains a lot of more details around all these steps, links to the scanners, how to interpret the results, etc. Second big step in modernizing is once we have fully released group connection. I shouldn't say groupify anymore. So the capability that Vesta talked about previously. So being able to connect your site to a group is an important part of a modernization story. And again, we have tooling, a scanner to help you assess which sites are ready to groupify, and we have guidance to help you groupify. Because although there is an API, the API does not do the full groupify work in our view. So that's why we have a bullet groupify PowerShell script that you can use and can further extend, so that it becomes like your modernization script. Now, these 2 already were touched upon in past calls. Today I want to really focus on something brand new, something we show for the first time, so really early preview, and that's guidance and tech around how to transform your classic wiki and site pages into modern site pages. So essentially a tool that you can use to take your classic wiki page and get like a modern equivalent from it. So now let's jump in. Now this is for you guys probably fairly basic information, but just to get started, a wiki page is a mixture of text and web parts, right? So text can be have complex formatting and have basic formatting, like tables, font sizes, bullets, etc. And then you can have one or more web parts intermixed with the text. And the wiki page has a layout. So you see the text layout button and the ribbon. So it has like there's a number of, I think about 8 default layout flavors that you can pick. Web part page is less used. When we scan the environments, we see way less web part pages compared to wiki pages, but they still are being used. And the web part page is essentially a layout with web part zones, and in the web part zone you can put one or more web parts. I think that's kind of setting the scene where we start from. So the scope of the tooling that I'm going to show is being able to modernize those sites. You might ask, what about publishing sites? And the question is not yet. So definitely on the radar, but let's say we don't have the necessary modern capabilities to start tackling the publishing problem right now. So current focus is on regular wiki pages and web pages. So it's pages that appear in your collaboration sites. How does it work? I tried to kind of envision the page transformation engine in 4 big steps. So in the first step, the page transformation engine will read a model. And we're going to show the model in the demo, but essentially it's the model gives you all the flexibility you want to drive the migration story. So what does page migration do? Essentially reading a source page with web parts and creating something new, a modern page with modern client-side web parts, being first-party, third-party web parts. Now, how we do that, that's different per customer. Each customer might have their own requirements, might want to plug in their own third-party web parts. So that's why the model offers flexibility. So you can tweak it without having to change the actual transformation engine. Once the model is loaded, we analyze a page. So analyzing a page means just reading the file and getting all the web part information and the layout from the actual source page. So this gets you a collection of web parts with their properties. Wiki Text is kind of put in a fake Wiki Text part. So we just stuff the Wiki HTML into a kind of a fake web part. So we have a nice collection of web parts and a layout to go to the next step. The next step is step 3. In here, we essentially enrich the information we got from the web part. So let's give an example. An XSLT list view web part, when you put it on a page, you can pick a view and say like, I want to show this document library with this particular view. Great. Now, when you export that web part, when you look at the properties, we don't tell you like which view was used. We give you the XML definition of the actual view. So the definition of the view is there, but we don't give you the ID anymore. Now, the modern client-side list web part does require the view ID to configure it to pick a particular view. So we need to have a flexible model that can be used to enrich the data we have. And that's what this step 3 is doing. And then finally, step 4 is applied enriched data and the model to generate a modern client-side page with web parts, first-party, third-party, modern web parts on the page, and save the page. And at very high level, and in demo things will become more clear, but this gives you kind of a quick overview. Here are some screenshots from results. We'll do a live demo in a second, but this gives you like a view on what you get. Left, you see the wiki page, you see the wiki text, you see the list in there. The right side, you see the same text, so that's already good. You see the same list in a modern equivalent, the modern version of that list. The table looks differently because styling is differently. So the tool rewrites the Wiki HTML into HTML which is compatible and compliant with what the modern text editor can support. You also see that the list web part, the left side, is mapped to a combination of a list web part at the right side and a piece of text above it. So you can have flexible mappings. And again, once we show the model, this will become more clear. Here is the web part page being transformed. Similar story, you see the image going to the right side as an image web part. You see the list. And you see at the right side, you see a script editor web part. And now, script editor web part is not something that Microsoft offers out of the box. So it's a third-party web part. And this just to show you that you can use third-party web parts in a transformation model. You can use any web part. If you have created a fancy web part and you want to put it on a page as a replacement for something that's already there, so some existing web part, then you can do that. But I think a demo says more than just slides, so let's do that. And hopefully the sharing gods are with me, so I'm going to share my desktop. All right, can someone confirm once they see my desktop?
Loading, 3 dots.
You should see like a SharePoint.
Yep, correct.
Page. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, super. So I did my very best to make the most ugly looking wiki page in the world, and I think I succeeded. But it's for a purpose, because this wiki page shows a lot of content, web parts that we can transform into a modern page. So let's have a first quick peek at the source page. So this is a wiki page. I'm going to put it in edit mode so you can see the layout. It has a script editor, web part, default script editor web part, saying hello from webparts.aspx. Okay. Then it has like wiki text with headings, with highlights, with formatting, sizes, left center, middle center, the indenting, bullets, tables, another table, colors. So the most commonly used formatting options in the wiki text are here. Scrolling down, we see here like two list view web parts, a basic list and a documents library, each having a custom view. We see a content editor web part where content is embedded. We see the same content editor web part pointing to an ASPX file, so just referencing a file. We see, scroll a bit to the right, a script editor web part showing this alert message. An add-in part, so add-ins which work on classic pages also work on modern pages. And the same applies for the modern web parts. This Hello World web part is a modern SPX web part, which obviously works on a modern page, but also works on a classic page. So we have put those on the classic page, so the add-in and the modern web part. What else do we have here? We have a media web part showing media located into the SharePoint site, so in the site S library as an MP4 file. There's a YouTube embed, which is an iframe embed. In here, we have an Excel workbook loaded. It should load. Doesn't want to do it right now. A Visio one, a picture, an image gallery showing images. And here's the Excel sheet, by the way, so it is there. What else? HTML form web part, page viewer web part, and summary links web part. So a collection of commonly used web parts are on this page. Now I want to transform this page. I want to create a modern equivalent from this page. And since this is very early preview, I'm going to show you the code-based approach, calling it via code. Later on, you will be able to also use PowerShell. So there will be a PowerShell commandlet that you can use to trigger the page transformation. Now, before doing the actual transformation, let's talk about the model. Because remember in step 1, I talked about this flexible model that you can tailor and tweak. And that's actually an XML file. So sorry, no JSON. I'm still old school guy. I've chosen XML for this one since it's a pretty huge, big file, and I have a schema, etc. Now, each web part that you want to transform is defined in here. So, sample XLT list viewer part is defined, and we list the properties which we think might be interesting for you when you drive a page transformation, of web part transformation. So you have these properties. But remember that we talked about that list view ID. The modern web part needs a list view ID, and we don't have it. What's the way to get it? Is to call a function on this web part. So when the tool runs, it sees the list view web part, and it understands that, wait, I need to call this function, list detect used view, and taking in the input from the web part, from the actual web part, so taking in the actual list ID and actual XML definition of the web part, and out comes a list view ID. And this function is nothing more than a basic method that we offer. Let's see where this one is. Here is list detect used view. You see the input and the string comes out. It does check the list view XML, and at the very end it will output the used view ID, or if not found, the default view ID of the particular list. Now you might wonder, like, okay, fine, there will be some functions delivered by the tool, great, but I want to make my own functions. You can. So scrolling up a little bit, there's an add-on section, so you can define your own assemblies here. Scroll to the right, you see this sample add-on.dll. So you define your own assembly. You tell us which type, my custom functions, you want to use from that assembly, and give it a name called custom. Once you have done that, you can then start doing something like this. So say custom dot and then your method name. So you can just extend the model and the logic by adding an assembly without having to change the actual tool. So I hope this shows some flexibility that the model has, so you can enrich the web path properties. Next step is mapping them. So how do I translate this XLT list view web path into something modern? For that, we have a mapping. I'm going to zoom in on this mapping. So we map a list to this list mapping. We take, we replace the source web part with a combination of a client-side text and a client-side web part of the type list, so out-of-the-box list web part. As you probably know from previous calls and from working with client-side pages, client-side web parts require JSON properties. So there's a JSON control data which contains the web part properties. Now these web part properties, they are configured at runtime. How? By replacement of tokens. So it's kind of a token replacement model. So if I scroll in here a little bit to the right, you see, for example, the title token over here, list server relative URL token. So what happens is that this web part is configured by replacing the tokens which you got from the web part or from calling functions on the web part. So then the final question to get answered is, okay, this source web part can maybe have multiple targets, which is valid use case. This one has multiple targets, but I'm going to pick another example, the content editor web part. So for content editor web part, when you provide a content link, so a link to a file, to an HTML file, to an HPX file, you can perfectly replace it with an out-of-the-box content embed web part. Works great. However, if you just provide the raw HTML inside the web part, then you need something else, like a script editor web part, which is a custom web part used here in this mapping. To distinguish which mapping to use, you can call what we call a selector, which is nothing more than a method which gets input from the web part and returns a string being the name of the mapping to use. So this way you can get a lot of flexibility around how to which mapping to apply in which case. You can be fully dynamic. All right, so that some information on the model. Let's actually run it. I'm going to go to my test case. And this is just a regular test case, but it shows the API. So you will get a page transformation information class that you can populate. And then you, and it takes the actual page as input in the constructor. And then you call the page transformator.transform. There's lots of flexibility in how it behaves and what you can configure. It's too much detail for today. I'm just gonna today just run this one how it is. So I'm gonna right click and run this test case. So test run started. I didn't put any breakpoints, so it should not take that long. So let's wait for it to finish. So what it now does is analyzing the page, getting all the web parts, iterating over the web parts. For each web part, it will look up the mapping and apply the mapping, and in the end, save the page. So this one was done. It's finished. Let's have a look at our, if you have a result. So I'm going to go over here. This is my, I'm going to refresh the site pages library. Already showed a few seconds ago, so that should be the one that we need. Yes, so a few seconds ago, a page was created called migrated_webparts. For now, this is a convention used in this preview. Later on, you will be able to configure how do you name the new page, and we're going to talk about that as well in the final slides of this session. So, but let's have a peek. What did we get? Does it look good or not at all? So, first thing to notice, our alert. So, hey, the script runs. So the script got transformed from the classic page to the new page. Do you want to embed a script like this, it's discussable, and you might want to just stay away from this approach. But reality is that there's a massive amount of classic pages having script. Some scripts might be valid to have in there going forward, some not. So you have to really evaluate. But do know that there is an option using a third-party client-side script editor web part. Okay, now the page loaded. I'm going to put the page in edit mode, so you can see the structure of the page. So this is loading up. Give it some time to load because it's a complex big page. Okay, all right, here we are. So in the first row, you see the wiki text. Remember that whole lot of text, and you see that the formatting of the text is there. So if I select the bold piece and I go to the web part configuration, the text configuration, you see that bold is selected. If I go to the highlight, yellow is selected. So we create HTML which is compliant with the text editor in Modern. You see the indenting being retained, the bullets, the numbers, the tables, the colors, all being retained. Then going down, we see the list view web part. So we had like this little title above each web part. So list view, so that's replaced by a piece of text. Then the list was mapped to a text piece and an actual list web part. So that's there as well. We see the content editor web parts. This one with embedded the link to the file, essentially. Documents, list web part again. The script editor, our add-in. So this is the Samir wants to get control. Sorry, Samir. So this is the add-in part that was on the classic page showing up on the modern page. Here is our modern client-side web part showing up again with the same configuration. So we can retain the configuration. The media web part is there. Excel is there. This is there's one thing that's currently not there and not supported from a tech perspective, and that's a wiki page having embedded images and videos. Because like a text part in Modern UI cannot have embedded images and videos as a design choice. So to work around, what the tool will do is it will put a placeholder saying like, okay, here there was like an iframe embedding this particular YouTube video. At the very end of the page, you will get individual web parts for each image and video, which you can then reorder and organize and put on the page where you want to have it. So we have this Excel file, the Visio, essentially everything is there. The image gallery, HTML form web part. Even the summary links is replaced by clean HTML, which works in text editor, page viewer. So not all web parts are already mapped, but the commonly used web parts are mapped in this current version. We're working on content by query, content by search web parts, map them to the highlighted content modern equivalent. But I hope this gives you like a view on that there is some decent level of feature parity once the web parts are mapped. Let's flip back to slides for a second. Okay, it's loading.
Loading.
Oops, we are at the beginning.
Yeah, it does that as well. Well, it's loading for me still, but you probably get to go to the right slide.
Yep, trying that with thumbnails. Here we go. How are we doing on time? I need to wrap up.
In 5 minutes, I think that should give enough time for the add-in. But it's obviously if you have Q&A, it would be nice as well.
Yeah, I want to just talk about two things really quick. So what you saw was that we created a new page for the existing classic page. So we are thinking about a model where the classic and the modern page are linked together, where you can kind of give your users an option to acknowledge that the page has been migrated and keep the modern page, or provide feedback why it was not good, etc. This is a mock-up. Nothing has been developed yet, but there is some thinking around, because as said, like, the transformation is as good as the model is, and we don't have feature parity between each and every classic web part compared to modern. So there's 80 plus web parts of SharePoint Online. We have about 20 modern equivalents, so there will always be some web parts that are not mapped, and what you do with those.
Which Bert, by the way, so obviously Bert's demo here, sorry for jumping Bert on this one, I can't help myself, sorry for that. Now, what you just said is super critical in the discussions related on the modernization. You should never ever go to a customer or have a discussion that, hey, we're going to modernize everything, and then without understanding what can you modernize and what you cannot modernize. So what is the matching capabilities? And sure, the modern UIs are going leapfrogs every now and then forwards, and within a few weeks in SPC there will be again an announcement. So gradually they will catch up on the functionalities, what is needed in Classic. But really the key is to understand, before going anybody to promise to modernize them, is to understand what the customer is having or what the deployment is having, what are the web parts over there, and then is there a matching web part, or is there a compromised web part? Because if the customer, or is it an internal customer or an external customer, demands that we want to go to the modern UIs, then you can always have the discussion that, okay, that particular web part isn't there, but there's a close enough web part which is following. So what if we would do mapping one-to-one between that? So
absolutely, and that's why the model has the flexibility. So you can choose your own mappings, you can insert your own third-party modern web parts. That's definitely possible, and I think you will have to do that to meet your customer requirements.
Yep.
Depending on the customer, especially for the big customers. Just to wrap up, I'm going to go one slide back. There is a link here on the deck to the source code. So everything that you have seen is already available from a code perspective. So you can, if you want to get really early access, you can just get the PnP tools repository and look at the code and play around. Now, the actual aim is to get something published to NuGet and to PowerShell Gallery before the end of May, hopefully before the SharePoint conference even. So as a .NET developer, you can pick the NuGet package and use it, and there will be a PowerShell commandlet as well that you can use to kind of transform a page using one PowerShell commandlet. The reason why they are separate for now is just to give some more deployment agility. Later on, it definitely is the plan to just embed all of this into the regular SharePoint PnP Core Online and SharePoint PnP PowerShell, so that you don't have to have both separately. But while we're in the developer phase and in the preview phase of this tooling, they will be separate, so it gets easier to update, essentially. With that,
did I paste in the right link? Because that's a modernization scanner.
Oh, so that's the wrong one. Yeah. Let me actually grab the link from here. I have it open on my site. So this should be the link to the actual source code. And feel free to reuse already, meaning if you, I think Vest and I discussed about that, if you would like to build a product that does page migration, just reuse what there is there to reuse and to further, we'll further improve it, but it is an open source component that can be used for page transformation. For your custom project, for your commercial purposes, whatever you want to do with it, I think is good.
It's MIT license. Now you need to remember that it is an open source though, so if there's a bug over there, we are kind of there's no SLA for fixing that bug. But now if you build your own offering on top of this, you can absolutely get the code and hopefully contribute back as well on the structure what is here.
You can make it like a nice mapping file with some additional third-party web parts that fixes some of the gaps that in our first-party offering. That would be a super great thing to share with the community, or for you to even sell if you want. Don't share it, but you see, I think I see a lot of opportunities and possibilities here. This is a new terrain. We're getting into a new area, and there's not much out there that can do this. Nothing actually.
Yeah, so classic migration tooling doesn't do modernization, it just moves content. It doesn't actually do mapping of the functionality. So this is a great starting point for helping your customer to transform when somebody raises their hand saying, we need to move now. So because it's not really migration, it is a transformation. So cool. I think from a timing perspective, we need to move to Dimcho for the to talk about adding an app source process, and I can update in certain level our thinking on the SPFX, but I can't promise anything at this point. But Dimcho, and sorry for pronouncing your name completely wrong.
Yes, you pronounce it correctly.
Okay, cool, thank you.
You hear me well, I guess. I request the control.
Yep, you have control. You need to share your screen because I'm still seeing presentation.
Yes. Let me know when you see it. My screen.
Yep. Loading, 3 dots, wait a while. And got it. Yep, all good.
Okay, so tell me if I speak too close to my microphone or too far, and you don't hear me well. So I'm starting. My name is Dimcho. I'm located in Bulgaria. This is Eastern Europe, and I'm a freelancer. I'm doing consulting from some time, and from the beginning of this year, I decided to try to move from consulting to product development, again rated in SharePoint. And I have some experience with the App Source Store, so today I want to share what I have learned and just give you some guidelines, suggestions, and to point to some specifics in the add-in development. What I'll do is first I'll show you the seller dashboard and some important links there, and then I'll do a demo of 2 add-ins. The message that I want to give with this presentation is first, add-in development model is not dead. It is actually very powerful one, and it can be used together with SharePoint framework. Something else that I want to point is that app source stores is very important for either the independent software vendors like me and also for small companies. And when I'm saying small companies in that app source store, I see in my consulting is that small companies like 20 or 30 employee, they have Office 365, they use SharePoint, they need solutions, but they, because of money or something, they are not hiring developers, and they don't have budget for this. And they are more willing to come here in the app source and to search for a good solution. And in this context, I would say that app source somehow is on the top of GitHub. What I mean is that GitHub is great. There are great samples and functionalities, but these small companies, they don't have the expertise to get the code, to build it, to fill it with their environment and to deploy it. So from that perspective, I would say that app source is important for small businesses to get end-to-end solution. And that is something that I decided to try to get some small functionalities, to package them and to deploy here. So to see whether the business will like this, my ideas and my solutions. Who can participate in the App Source Store? Everybody, either a single developer or a companies. You can visit this link and see how you can register for the App Source Store. Again, you can do it as a single developer or like a company. And once you register to the App Source Store, you have access to the developer dashboard, or so-called seller dashboard. And you can choose the program you want to participate. Now I will speak only for this one, which is for Office 365 add-ins. And what I'm showing you now is my true developer dashboard. And as you see, I have released several add-ins. Today, I'm going to demonstrate you, this one, which is the feedbacker. Okay, and yeah, Let me then directly jump on the demo, and first I'll show you from user perspectives what I have deployed to the store, and it is free. And then I'll show you more the architecture behind this. So I'm changing my screens, and now I'm going to my SharePoint page. Just something that when I was asking the companies, these small companies that I'm talking about, what they want as functionality, they always say, we want something to work everywhere, and we want to be nice looking and easy to use. And converting this in requirements, actually they want everything to work either in modern or in classic pages. And this is the truth. Everybody wants to be beautiful. So the first add-in that I mentioned is a tool that gives you to build such kind of feedback forms. So every here on this form is retrieved dynamically from a list item. All this feedback text, whether to have ratings, whether to not have ratings, the submission text, even the styling. If I scroll a little bit down, I can show you again the same component but with different color. So all this is read dynamically, and it is built with add-in. There is no SharePoint framework extension here. As I mentioned, this worked in a classic page again. So here at this page, I have deployed the same component with the same feedback settings here. And what I want to show you again is there is another option to use add-ins with functionalities. We can achieve something like this. So how does all this works? First of all, I have installed an add-in, and I'm not going to go deeper in the add-in architecture, but basically when we installed an add-in, it has a dedicated subsite. So this subsite has a specific URL, and it is just a regular SharePoint site. This is a page that uses traditional techniques from the on-premises development, but I have bring also some modern experience like this panel. And the form that I showed you, all settings are read dynamically from this campaign list. When somebody reacts on the form, it is saved here in another list. I'm not going in what this list contains, but I just want to draw you the model that I'm speaking about. And what I showed you is not new. This is the traditional add-in model. And I show you components that was loaded inside iframes. The new thing here, and where I brought the Office UI Fabric, React, Visual Studio Code, and Webpack is here in the page that we show inside the iframe. I bundle one JS file, and it brings the whole functionality. And this functionality, it uses REST calls to the REST calls for the list inside the same web. The third demo that I showed you, this one, which actually is more nice looking, and there is no scroll bars, nothing. It looks a little bit different model. Again, on the top of SharePoint add-ins, when the add-in is installed, I create one asset library in the root site, and then I upload one script. So this script, again bundled with the technology that I told you, now this file can be loaded inside classic page for content editor. It can be loaded again in modern pages for this third-party tool of Michael Svensson. And once it is loaded here, it can communicate with the add-in subsite. And here is the trick how the script from the host web communicate with the add-in. Actually, add-in is nothing more than a subsite. So if you use REST calls to the subsite and you construct your URLs as you communicate with subsite, it will work. And in this way, we can achieve, I would say, good functionality where we use add-in web as a container of our list and data, while we are having components in the host web that communicates with these add-ins. just to show you a little bit advanced example of this scenario with SharePoint framework extension. Now I change my page, and what you see now is a modern site, and it has this component. This component is a teaching bubble of Office UI component, and it is displayed on each single page. No matter whether you have a classic page or a modern page, as you see, this control is here, and it can be used to show some small working messages. This approach for loading component on each pages can be used for different components. For example, instead of this functionality, which is somehow inbox like Facebook, it can load feedback form and so on. Again, I just want to show you what the technical approach behind this demo is. First of all, I use combination of add-in and SharePoint framework. And because I start speaking about the app source, currently app source does not support SharePoint framework, which I would say is a big limitation. So if you want to deploy something, you should forget for the SharePoint framework at all for now. But if we go out of the App Source store and look as a development model, I think that combining add-ins and SharePoint framework is a great approach, because as I said, we can use the add-in web to store our lists. We can deploy script at the host web, and to have script link and custom application customizer deployed in our site. And in this way, we are handling classic pages and modern pages. This was what I prepared. I see that I'm out of time, so I just wanted to show you this. I have prepared to show you also in the code, but I think we won't have time for this. Just a few last sentences. When I am referring to SharePoint add-ins, I mean using this Visual Studio project template. This is what I prepared. Sorry, I was in a hurry, but I see that I don't have
that's
time.
all good. We took too much time on the other stuff. So this is, but from just from a understanding, if you go to the store, the app source submission site, how was the process and validation and everything else? Just out of
Yep. So once you have the access to this dashboard, from here you're able to create your component, and it is pretty straightforward. So once you develop your add-in, your package, you came here, you upload it, and then you are waiting 5 days around for the Microsoft Teams to give you a message whether you have passed all tests or not. For example, the add-in that I showed you with this teaching bubble, it fails the validation. And here is what I received. I received this PDF, and there was explanation about I failed here. So these sentences means that I cannot deploy anything that is outside of the SharePoint add-in models. And unfortunately, SharePoint framework was not here. Originally, I thought that this also handles SharePoint framework, but not. Yeah. And just directly to answer your question, for me, the whole process of submission is easy. So once we get here, we upload our package, we filled the information about our add-in, wait several days, and then we either have confirmation mail, everything is okay, or we have such kind of report. This is wrong, and we can fix it. So the submission process, I would say, is good.
Excellent. I'm just going to move back on the slide so we can close up. But while we're doing that, we're going to take, again, a few extra minutes. Sorry for that. So just a quick note on the SharePoint framework. So from my engineering side, so I put my engineering hat on. So we are absolutely looking into having support for app source for SharePoint framework components. Now, how it will exactly look like, how the licensing, everything else will look like, that's still yet to be decided completely. We had a open position in our team, so my team is responsible of SharePoint framework and the underlying technologies and APIs and everything else. So in our PM team, we had an open position which was actually now filled like last week, and we can finally start slightly scaling. We've been having a scalability problem of getting things moving, and we know that the store and app source is super important. Most likely, and this is, don't hold me accountable of this one yet, most likely what will happen is that we'll just provide you a marketplace where you can actually promote your application, and then it's up to you to figure out the licensing model and all of that stuff. So we kind of walk away from all of that discussion and complexity, but we want you to be able to easily put your SharePoint framework solutions to the app source and then promote them, and then potentially come up with a few recommended options for licensing, but not really take any cuts from the sales and all of that. So that's not really in our intention, but yet to be fully locked down, yet to be fully decided. It's an ongoing discussion, ongoing design discussion, so don't hold me accountable of this really early speculation how it will look like. Definitely won't be, I can actually spill the beans on this one, won't be explained or announced in SBC. So that's not going to happen within a few weeks. We definitely will have more news by Ignite. Will it be available by Ignite? I would say highly unlikely, but we'll see. But it's definitely in our radar to put some resources on. Cool. Thank you, Bert. Thank you, Dimcho. This is actually really great refresh also on the adding model and the possibilities on the adding model. And immediately we know that there's a massive amount of opportunities when we open up the store and app source for SharePoint Framework solutions. And even more within a week or two when we announced some additional cool stuff. So there's really cool stuff coming, and stay tuned and watch what we announced in the social media. Join on next Thursday's SharePoint Framework community call. We'll walk through other stuff there as well. We actually have the monthly community call on next Tuesday as well, where we'll walk through what we have released within the last month. We're going to talk about new provisioning schema support. We're going to talk about provisioning engine support, and we're going to talk about what else? What else? There was one more thing, but there's a few demos on that one as well. But quite a few community calls. Everything will be recorded, available in the YouTube channel within 24 hours. But thank you for the demos. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your feedback. Please keep the feedback and input coming in the future as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.